Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, where each episode we bring you a new interview with one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. You can now subscribe to our podcast on Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, or on our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/The Director's Cut. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Justin Lin's new sci-fi film, Star Trek Beyond. The latest installment of the Star Trek franchise finds Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the Enterprise crew halfway into their 5-year mission of exploring uncharted space, when they are attacked by hostile aliens and forced to abandon ship. Stranded on an unknown planet with no means of aid or rescue, they must find a way to deal with a new ruthless enemy. Following a screening of the film in Los Angeles, Mr. Lin spoke with director Joe Russo about the joys and challenges of making Star Trek Beyond. Listen on for highlights from their conversation, including Lin talking about his love of Star Trek from a young age and how he decided to destroy the iconic Starship Enterprise in the first act of the film. Enjoy.
Thank you everybody for coming out on a Sunday. I just got to say before we start, that is how you direct action. That's spectacular. Great job, Justin. Yeah.
Thank you.
In addition to great character, great heart, great story. It's a really fantastic film. Wonderful reviews. So we're just gonna chat a little bit. I jotted down a few thoughts. Justin and I have been friends for 21 years. We went to UCLA Film School together, graduate school, I think from 1995 to 98. And we had a really nice moment about 10 years ago when both of our careers were transitioning from indie film to commercial filmmaking, and we're on sound stages next door to each other on the Universal lot. So from two guys who were in the sort of do-it-yourself program at UCLA to end up on sound stages next to each other 10 years later was an accomplishment. So let's talk a little bit about your career. I think it's been an amazing career with an unbelievable footprint. When you sort of look back on it, it's filled with critical success, indie success, massive blockbuster success. This gentleman has $2 billion in box office to his name. You direct films, you direct television, shows like Community and True Detective. You direct commercials. You pioneered narrative in the VR space with your short film Help that just won 2 Gold Lions at Cannes. You have your own YouTube channel, your own production company, your own branded entertainment company. Do you ever sleep? So let me ask you this. What drives your intense desire to diversify?
I think just to grow, I mean, I remember very clearly, 2001, it was that moment where the 10 credit cards are on the coffee table, and I kind of felt like, all right, I get this one shot, let's go for it. And so, every time we do something, I kind of always go back to that moment, and these opportunities that are out there. It's about just trying to grow every day, and sometimes being in really kind of scary spots. I mean, I remember when you called and said, "Hey, we're doing the show Community, come and shoot a couple episodes," and it was so exciting because at that point, this is a business where I had just done the fast movies and everyone thinks it's action, and so it's so refreshing to have the opportunity for you to even call me and say, "Hey, let's try some comedy." And I mean, I had such a great time doing those 3 episodes, and I grew probably more in doing those 3 episodes than by any other period.
Well, you directed a seminal episode of the show, which I think ended up shifting the show in a different direction. It was a paintball episode, and basically we were spoofing action movies. So it was a community. It was the first paintball episode. and it was early on in season one, or near the end of season one. But it sort of shifted the direction of the show, where we started to embrace more genre spoofing. So I think it was, taking those kinds of risks lead to really, really compelling ideas, and it ended up shaping the next 4.5 seasons of that show. I think something that'd be interesting for the audience to hear is what do you think is the most essential motivating factor for you in choosing a project or in choosing what you're going to put your creative energy into with so many diverse interests? What is it that motivates you?
I mean, I think it really is the environment you want to be in. I think creatively, the characters. I love going 24/7. I love being in production and doing something, because then I don't have to do anything else. And I think it's an emotional relationship with the characters and what the journey you're about to go on and the themes you want to explore. And but on top of that, I think the other thing that's very important is the people you want to be around with. That's something that I know it's a luxury and something that you have to earn. But that's something very important to me, because if I'm going to put in that kind of effort, I want everybody around me to be of the same mindset, And I think sometimes when the budgets get bigger and bigger, there's a tendency to have more cooks in the kitchen. And I think, it's very important to me that, I don't care if it's, 250, whatever the budget is, that at the end of the day, it's same as if we're making a $200,000 credit card movie.
Well, it's good because it segues well into the next question, which family and multiculturalism are, I think, extremely important themes to you and your work. Can you talk about why that is?
It always bothered me when I was growing up, or actually when I was trying to raise money for Better Luck Tomorrow, and it always came back people saying, "Hey, man, you can't make a movie with Asian American leads because nobody's going to watch it." And I'd ask them well, why? And they said, well, they can't relate. It doesn't look like them. And I'm like, well, I grew up, I can relate to Rocky Balboa. He doesn't look like me, it doesn't make any sense. And I think at the end of the day, it was I feel like if there's an opportunity and if it's right, I just want to make movies that, have the best talent on screen. I think, when we started, I remember John Cho had just come down from Berkeley and Sung Kang had just started. And when I was working with them, I had such a good time, and I really kind of can see that they're very talented. And then when I went off and I got more experience under my belt, I realized it wasn't a matter of talent. It really just opportunity, because the talent is there. So it's not something that I seek out and want to make. It's just something that I feel like, if I'm going to be positioned to make movies, I want to work with great people, and I want it to reflect my world.
Well, I think you've done as much as anyone, I think, in the business over the last 10 years in terms of diversity and in the commercial space. I think Fast and the Furious is a real is a franchise that is built around diversity and its approach to a world audience and embracing world audiences. And I think looking back on your indie work and how you got into the business, much of that work is a testimony to, I think, your cultural pride and your identity. How in a bigger franchise space do you feel like you can ensure that your heritage has an influence on your filmmaking?
Wow, what? I'm sorry.
So I think how do you feel like you did in your indie work?
Yeah.
It was really distinctive
Yeah.
in terms of your cultural identity, right? And then transitioning into the commercial space,
Yeah.
which is a much larger space. It has much wider appeal. You're trying to target wider audiences. How do you feel that you bring a piece of who you are into that space? How do you ensure that that cultural pride still comes across? And this is sort of crossing into the questions that we were discussing up to this point, but I'm trying to dig a little deeper into who you are and how you grew up and how that affects who you are as a filmmaker.
Well, I think a lot of times, I think this business. I mean, especially with the budget get bigger, people tend to be more conservative, and it's just the way it is, and you see that it also tends to be a bit more reactionary, and when something works, everybody wants to do the same thing, and there is a system that's been in place for years and years, and it goes all the way to not only like who's auditioning, but who's repping that actor, and so for me, it's just about having those conversations. They're not pleasant, especially in '05 when I was just starting off, wanting to have open calls. That was like, those are tough conversations to have.
Right.
The studios are thinking you're wasting your time, but I felt like it was, it's something that I felt like it's necessary. It's not even about somebody getting the role, but it's creating these opportunities so somebody can get in that room and get the experience too, and so, I feel like everything I do has to be a part of me, has to have my point of view, has to have my imprint. And I think that's very much from the indie, and in many ways kind of it was the philosophy of UCLA, right? Like having been in that program, it was, it was definitely not, when we were there, it was not a great program for you to have network, because nobody was, it was really hard to meet anybody that was from that program that was working in the business. But it was really cool because we got to like hone in. Like when we took Yerzy class, it was about trying to find a point of view to every beat of every scene, and that's something that I really appreciate, and something that I enjoy doing. Whether it's an indie movie or if it's a big studio film, it's the approach is the same. Like I hope to continue, and I want to keep evolving, but I think the approach to me is for me is the most important aspect of doing this.
You have a incredible gift for working with ensemble casts. I think it's been reflected in the work in Fast and Furious. It's certainly on the screen in this film. You make sure that each character has a distinct personality, a motivation, an arc, no matter how big or small the part. Why do you, as a filmmaker, enjoy working with large casts? What is it about you that attracts you to that?
It's interesting. I didn't really think about it too much until I was doing Star Trek, and I remember, when I was growing up, I watched Star Trek on reruns with my parents, and it was only 3 seasons, so every year you're watching that same episode like probably 4 times, right? And so, for me, it was such a great kind of experience with the family, and kind of going with Captain Kirk and the whole crew. But after like a couple of years, you start going to kind of fan fiction land. You start thinking about, well, what does these characters do? Do Sulu and Chekhov, do they hang out when they leave the
telling
bridge?
your own stories in your head.
Yeah, and you started kind of going into that, and I always love that, and I love the show was, it's an ensemble, but it was very much Kirk and Spock, but I love all the other characters, and so I think coming up and making the movies and stuff, one of the things that I really try to be mindful of is the day players. They come in for one day. They don't know anybody. They got to deliver like usually 1 or 2 lines, and then they're gone.
And they get killed.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the toughest. Those are the toughest gigs to really kind of get through. And so I really enjoy kind of just even hanging out with them and talking to them about just moments, not just in that scene, but what leads up to that scene, and that's something I really enjoy. And I think it is cool. I feel like I've come full circle with Trek, because I got to kind of contribute to the legacy of these great characters, and but it really did come from, I think, my love of kind of watching the show from all the way when I was 8 years old.
We'll talk about that a little bit, because there's a tribute to your father in the movie, and Trek was important to you as a child. Talk a little bit about how and why that was.
Well, our family just immigrated to the States, when I was 8, and I remember thinking, wow, like I couldn't speak the language. My parents opened this fish and chips restaurant, and they would close at 9. We'd have dinner at 10, and Star Trek came on at 11, and we watch it every night. And that was our way of hanging out with our parents, my brothers and I, and it really it was so kind of progressive for TV. I mean, Sulu was just part of the crew. He wasn't there because he was, he knew Kung Fu, or he was a tourist or whatever. He was there because he was a human being, and I really enjoy that. And it was a big part of growing up, getting a sense that, family doesn't have to be just by blood, and And so now, I have a 7-year-old, like his uncles and aunts are my friends, and they're not, and that's become kind of new sense of family, and it's very much influenced by Trek.
It's interesting getting to work on, and I have the same experience with Marvel because I collected comic books when I was a kid, but working on something that you cherished as a child, how much does the emotional connection to that material and your remembrances of the show, how much did you bring that into the crafting of the story and the way that you treated the characters?
Well, what I really love about what JJ did in '09 was he respected kind of what came before, and he created a new timeline. As a fan, I thought that was a great way of re-engaging Trek. So in essence, you had to draw to the essence of all the characters, and that's something that I, when I signed on, I wanted to do that not only with Simon and Doug, but even with all the actors, to talk it through and really kind of build it so that whatever they're experiencing now, it's for the first time, and I think it's respecting what came before. I think that was very important, and so I grew up from 8 to 18, so I left for college, and so I hadn't seen Trek for like, I don't know, 30, 20 years, whatever, it's been a while. So we're really trying to kind of capture the essence of what I loved about it. But there'll be weird moments because, like, I remember one night Simon had sent a picture. It was with him and the alien from the Cobra maneuver, and he just sends these goofy pictures, and we just kind of laugh. But it was weird. I saw the picture, and I remember there was a captain's address to the crew, and I hadn't seen that episode since I was probably like 16 or something, and I pulled it up, and I went through it with Simon and Doug, and there was some great lines in there. We ended up influencing our address to the crew, so it's in there somewhere, and I just want to make sure that, we're respectful and we really try to capture the essence of these characters.
Where'd you do your undergrad?
Yeah. I did UCLA for 2 years in the film program also.
And
yeah.
then the film. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then what is it that triggered your love of film? Like what point did you realize you want to be a filmmaker?
It was my undergrad thesis film. It was a 10-minute non-sync film, and it was $4,000, and that was $4,000 could have been $400 million. It was so much money, and I remember working 3 jobs just trying to pay off that film, and at that point I realized I love this, and the idea of filmmaking, of getting a collective group of people together with nothing, and you're going to create something to project on screen, was so addictive. And I'm a big sports guy, and I love basketball.
He's a huge sports guy.
And
it's an understatement.
And I think that's, to me, it's very similar. I think making films, you can't do it by yourself. You need a collective, and you need to hopefully have a vision, and you need to motivate and hopefully get everybody on the same lane. And that's something that, it doesn't matter. Like next project we do, we start over again. We have a bit more knowledge and we have some relationships, but you're starting over again, and that's something very exciting.
Well, you use a lot of the crew. Your crew stays with you and has stayed with you for many years. Can you talk about that a little bit, and some of the key personnel in your life?
Well, the culture is very important to me, and
it's a family.
It's a family. I mean, we go. It's the most intense artificial environment. I literally just handed Trek Friday night. It was like 11 p.m. I finally signed it over to Paramount. So I wouldn't let it go. You guys are seeing it here. This is not even done yet. So I'm still working on shots. I chase it all the way to the HBO version. I won't give up until at the very last second. And I love people that have the same mindset. And I'm not judging. I think that people can do it any way they want. I just know that when I remember when I first went on to Fast, and there were some really very great people. They work very differently. The culture was very different, and I think coming from the indie world, where anybody from the actor to the PA, they don't show up unless they believe in something, because there's no pay, and that's something that I want to, I take to heart. I feel like we're very fortunate. We're well compensated, but if you're just clocking in and out, then you should go with somebody else, because I love what I do, and I want to challenge everybody, and I want everybody to challenge me, and that's something that you getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and you're gonna work till whatever, you wrap at 7:30, and then I'm going to the cutting room. I gotta go write with the writers, everything. If you're putting that kind of energy, you want to be with the right people, and that culture is very important, and it's a very kind of indie influenced culture.
Who are some of your key collaborators?
It's really interesting because it's so intense, right? When you're starting off, and like I was on this one, I was very fortunate. Yeah, I was in a room with Simon Pegg, Doug Jung, and Lindsay Weber.
Well, how did it wind up? How did Simon wind up getting the script?
There was no script.
Yeah.
Like when I got the call from JJ, it was 18 months, probably 19 months from today, like that. And he said,
No script.
No script. I was shooting in Ventura. He called me and he said, "Do you like Trek?" And I said, I liked it as a kid. And he said, "Well, do you want to do it?" And I thought, it was a Thursday, and I said, "Well, give me till Monday. We have a day off. I'll meet you." And so it was that time that I went and I had dinner with my parents, and I sat there and I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. It's going to be the craziest ride because they were going to shoot in June. So that was like January, and we were going to shoot with nothing. And we were going to have to create something. So it took like a week and a half. I'm in London in a hotel room with Simon, Doug, and Lindsay, and we hadn't never met each other. We didn't know each other, and we had to start. And I had a whole crew waiting in Vancouver for direction. So it was like this process of making sure that like I'm just not misleading. I'm we're building this road and the car is driving on it at the same time. And but it was something that I didn't go in blindly. When I do the fast movies, those are insane schedules, but nothing close to this. But the difference also is that in fast, like I can come up with an idea, we go shoot around the corner, and this, every idea is another build, and so we had a really great crew, but it was something that I've done before. It was an exercise, but never to this extent, and so we were writing, and I was trying to create time for the writers, to write. So like the takedown was the idea that started off. So I was able to start building the Enterprise and start designing all the action sequences and really work on the character stuff. But at the same time, I would send, Simon and Doug, they go off and they try to like work on other scenes. And it was pretty intense. I mean, we were writing until like the very end of editing,
So really, at what point did you have a completed script by the time you were finished with the movie? Editorial or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll
tell you. Were you prepping
that
off an outline? What was the process like?
It's one of those things where it's kind of like job security. Like if I would have gotten killed at some point, like this movie wouldn't. Right. I think there were points where the script couldn't catch up to the production. So I would sit in the room and it'd be like 30 people, and I walk them through every beat, and they would question me on like anything they want, and I would give them answers, and there was nothing written at that point, and then, but to Simon and Doug's credit, they could have just said, okay, well, that's the process, we'll go work on this. But they had so much pride, they would just keep going, and they would try to catch up, and I've never had that. That was awesome.
You and John Cho have known each other for how long now?
We started working 96, so
it was 96.
Yeah.
Was that it was Shopping for Fangs,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Was that you started shooting that in 96 or 97?
96. Yeah.
So we were in film school. I think we were done with our first year. It was MFA, right? So
I think right before we were starting.
It was right before we were starting. You shot that?
I think you just done pieces, and
that's right.
Yeah.
So we had both made a film before we had gone to film school. We'd done it backwards. And then Shopping for Fangs led to Better Luck. But how did that process work? Did you self-fund Fangs?
No, Fangs was Quentin Lee, who I went to school with. Is very good friend. He's Canadian, and thank goodness, because I think they help artists, in Canada. I mean, I was talking to him about this idea, and he didn't say anything. And I guess he submitted it for some grant, and he got $40,000. And so like 3 months later, he said, "Hey, I got 40 grand. Remember that idea you told me?" And I said, 40 grand? So I was, we went and we got short ends and we got people together and we made a film for 40 grand, and I learned so much from that because, we had gotten into Toronto, and Roger Ebert had, he showed up to the screening, and I was like, I couldn't believe Roger Ebert was going to be there. And but I had this like really weird anxiety driven like feeling that like I wanted to run up to him and tell him like, oh, if I had more money, I would have done it this. If I had more money, I would have done that. But my lesson from that was it doesn't matter. He was there, and he was going to spend 2 hours watching this movie, and I should have no excuses, you know. And that was the biggest lesson from that experience, you know. And I learned so much so that when we were doing Better Luck Tomorrow, even though it was $250,000, you know, budget, there was no excuses. Like we were going to do whatever we had to, and whatever was on screen is something we're going to be proud of, you know. And that was a really great lesson.
So to be clear, Shopping for Fangs was his first film, made for $40,000. Better Luck Tomorrow you made for $250,000.
Yeah, Shopping for Fangs I directed with Quentin.
Right.
So Quentin had an idea, I had an idea, and it was like this, you know.
So you guys co-directed that.
Yeah.
And then you directed Better Luck by yourself, Sundance, Darling, and it really jump-started your entire career. What was I going to say? Talk about you know, how cool it is that John Cho and you each take your own path through the business and then wind up back together again.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing because from Shopping for Fangs to Better Luck Tomorrow, he became the MILF guy from American Pie, right? So it was like the big deal. And but it was great to be working with him on this movie, just seeing how he's evolved and grown as an actor. And it was just I was just so proud to have gone through that, even though it was like it's been like 15 years since we've worked together. But you know, I remember where I was when I heard he was going to be Sulu. You know, it's like it's always great to kind of keep tabs and seeing people that you're coming up with growing together.
You were really hell-bent on destroying the Enterprise in this movie. You want to talk a little bit about that, the process you went through with Simon? Because I know he was reticent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really interesting because I think it came more from a thematic, you know, when I signed on, I had 3 days. And I was just thinking more in terms of, like, why has Star Trek been around for 50 years? Is it the characters? You know, what is it? The philosophy. And, you know, I think a lot of times growing up, you see like San Francisco, you know, and Utopia. And like, I think the idea was to maybe try to deconstruct that. And then hopefully by doing that, you can, you know, reaffirm why there's so much love and passion for the franchise. And so it wasn't the first idea, but then when that was kind of set as a general rule, I felt like it felt right to literally rip the one thing that's united all the characters, which is the Enterprise, you know. And so I remember sitting in that room, and Simon's like, "You can't do that. Like, you can't do that in the first act. You got, you know." And so we had a whole thing, and Simon's very passionate, you know. And it was a tough 3 days, and it was me, him, and Doug and Lindsay, and but it led to a great, like, you know, I think that moment when he finally got it, it was a great moment because it was earned. It wasn't just like, you know, and that's what I appreciated about those 3 hellish days inside this hotel room in London, was to like really kind of get to know each other and like understand how we work and no holds barred, like anybody can say anything. And that was really, I think it ended up being great and kind of in a very short amount of time developing this relationship and rapport.
The original Star Trek is really steeped. I think one of the things that people love about it is steeped in political allegory, and it's got a really a deep liberal ideology to it. I think things that were really wonderfully rendered in this movie. So, you know, you really paid homage to the show in that respect. Can you talk about why that is important to you? What is it about that aspect of the show that spoke to you? Because certainly the villain, his agenda in the film is very much an agenda that would have been in the original run of the show.
I think in trying to deconstruct, I wanted to make sure that we have an antagonist at a philosophy that was valid, you know, something that, you know, we don't have to agree with, but we have to acknowledge that it's a valid philosophy. And so I remember, you know, this is while we were still writing, so I get on the phone with Idris, you know, and I'm like, I want to work with him. He is the one guy that I think can really kind of, in a very limited real estate, can bring that. And I remember sitting there, and he has a 2-year-old son, and he was crying in the back, and he's driving somewhere. We're talking. We ended up talking for an hour, and he just got really into it. And so it was great in that, I think it came from the original concept of trying to deconstruct, but to be able to talk to him, and he's all about the character and developing and building. That 1 hour that we spent became a really strong foundation for the character, and in many ways, and informed a lot of the scenes.
Talk a little bit about how important it was for you to introduce Star Trek's first openly gay character, and where the idea came from.
It's interesting because when we were talking about it, I was surprised that it would be the first time now. I always assumed that in the world of Star Trek, that just it's a non-issue. And so I think when we were talking about it, and Simon thought that Sulu would be a great character to kind of do it with, I felt like that was great, and I wanted to present it so that it's part of that world, and it actually came from a conversation I had where I was saying that I just wanted to get a sense of slice of life with every character. That's something that I always wanted as a kid, as a fan, and so it was done in a way that it shouldn't be an issue, and I think it became more of an issue, I think, when John called George and this whole thing happened, but it really came from a place of it exists and it's there, and it's something that it's just there.
I'm getting the wrap-up sign over here. Again, I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to thank you, Justin, for a fantastic film. And also, as a longtime friend and collaborator, partners in business, filmmaker, I want to thank you for everything that you've done. I talked about it at the beginning, but everything that you've done for diversity in the film business is really exceptional, and you're at the forefront of it, and we all thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I want to share real quick one story. Okay, so I'm doing this edit, and it was for this film, and I called Joe and I said, Joe, can you come and take a look? And he came and we showed the film, and Joe's like, I need to take a look at it again, and so it was like you had time like the next morning or something, and I had something else, and so Joe came in, sat with Steven, and went through the film again. And so I came in, and I'm looking in the on the internet, and he showed up like at 8 a.m. right after the premiere of your movie.
Civil War.
So
yeah.
It's great to be here, and thank you very much for all your support and just like the call for community, everything. So thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for listening to this TGA Q&A. You can watch more discussions like this on our website or our YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to The Director's Cut on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or our SoundCloud page so you won't miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.